You're listening to Aaron this Wednesday evening. Just gone 23 minutes to 8. Thanks for your company tonight. Now, we love a mystery on this show. So, investigative journalist Tony McMahon likes one too. His book looks at the life of fraudulent doctor Francis Tumblety and his connection to the 1865 assassination of President Abraham Lincoln and Jack the Ripper's killing spree in the East End of London in 1888. Tony's here now. What do we know about Francis, Tony?
He is a really fascinating character. In some ways, I think he might remind us of some of the strange people in our own society today, because he's somebody who works himself up from poverty. You know, it's a real rags to riches story. But he makes his money in a bit of a dubious way. Like you say, he's a quack doctor, fraudulent doctor, but he makes a lot of money. He sells these really dodgy cures for everything from pimples to cancer. He's a massive celebrity. Everybody knows him in the United States and Canada, but he's got this very sinister side. You know, he's always got these brushes with the law. You know, a couple of his patients die rather mysteriously. So a couple of manslaughter cases, always being accused of fraud, also being accused of gross indecency, which we can go into should you wish. But he's also implicated in two of the biggest crimes of the 19th century. He's arrested over the assassination of President Lincoln. He's suspected of being a conspirator along with John Wilkes Booth and the others, but he gets away with it. He's not hanged. Some of the other people are hanged. And then 25 years later, he is arrested as Jack the Ripper and he's seen as a serious suspect. So imagine this. Jack the Ripper could have been involved in the assassination of President Lincoln. I mean, that's how crazy it is. And that's your Francis Tumblety for you.
So what's your fascination with him?
I'll tell you what it was. I was asked to go on to a TV documentary to talk about him because he's an American. Well, he's an Irish American, actually. He was born in Ireland and went over to live in America. I'm actually of Irish heritage, so that kind of interested me on its own. But while I was researching him for this documentary, I just found out this weird connection, which they didn't know about, that he'd been arrested also over the Lincoln assassination as well as the Ripper case. And I thought, that's so random. I mean, how can this man be arrested for two such different crimes? I want to know more about him. And so I went and looked at newspapers from the time and police records and court records. This guy, year on year, was up to something no good. You know, there was always some scandal, crisis. You know, the police were bringing him in, the private detectives were tailing him because he's just always up to no good. And, you know, when he's eventually accused of being Jack the Ripper and Scotland Yard contact, you know, American cops and they say, have you ever heard of Francis Tumblety? Because nobody's heard of him in England. Of course, all the Americans say, oh, my God, that man, you know, he's been a pain for decades. And everybody says it's him as well. Yeah, he is Jack the Ripper. Everybody, his friends, nobody stands up for him. They all say, yeah, he's a bit of a psychopath. And there's some good reasons, as I outline in the book, for supposing that he very well could have been Jack the Ripper.
What do you think? Was he?
Well, I do actually. I think it's quite a convincing case because I'm not convinced by all this stuff about a member of the royal family or a Freemason. The thing about Tumblety, he's got a record of violence. He's also a massive woman hater. I mean, the police have it on the records. They say this guy is a misogynist. He really hates women. He's got a record of killing people. I mean, he's accused of killing two of his patients. He actually flees from Canada in one of the manslaughter cases. He gets on a horse and literally leaves the country. And he's just the other thing, by the way, I should mention, he's got a collection of uteruses, which he shows off at his dinner parties. Now, what's missing from these women who were killed in Whitechapel, you know, Annie Chapman, Mary Kelly, in particular, two of the women who are really horribly mutilated, is their uteruses. And that's what gets Scotland Yard really interested in him, because they say this guy's got a long criminal record, hates women, and he's got a collection of uteruses. And he's also a frustrated doctor. And whoever's killing the women in Whitechapel, he's kind of doing this weird kind of grotesque form of surgery, you know, when all the women are killed. So it all seems to make sense to the police, and we've got a letter from a retired detective from the time who wrote to a journalist years later saying, you know what, we were convinced it was him. And the only reason he got away with it was that he basically jumped bail, got on a ship to France, got on a ship to America, and for some reason was never extradited back to face charges. But he was gonna face his day in court. He could have been hanged.
If he was Jack the Ripper, what about all the stories of I spent 10 years of my life living in London, and a couple of those years I was living in Shoreditch, and used to go to around the Limehouse area, you go in different pubs, and they'd always go, Jack the Ripper used to drink in here. That would mean none of that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that yeah, if you think he was a local, fine, but you know what, Tumblety was there when it mattered. When the five, what they call the canonical murders happened. So yeah, you're right. I mean, he wouldn't have been propping up the bar for years before. He keeps moving around, by the way. He was in Liverpool beforehand, where, by the way, he was accused of killing one of his patients accidentally. And then, he's in America before that, but he's always jumping across the Atlantic. So no, he's not propping up the bars in East London, year after year. He may prop them up occasionally, but he is in Whitechapel when it matters. He is in Whitechapel, and the police nab him.
It's so fascinating. I just saw in front of me 1875 newspaper excerpt where the jury strongly censured the conduct of Mr. Tumblety in administering medicine. He being in total ignorance of the condition of his patient. The thing is, if you go back to this day and age, or you go back to these years, people utilising or using herbal remedies, none of it really had much science behind it. So a lot of it must have been trial and error. So the reason I say that, for every Tumblety, there must have been someone that was getting it right, but that was just by luck.
Oh, completely. I mean, look, in fairness to Tumblety, some of the mainstream medicine wasn't that, they were administering arsenic and all sorts of stuff now that, we get a mercury and so on, and we go, oh my God, that was awful. So you might have been better off taking one of his herbal cures so long as he liked you, but when he didn't, you're in trouble. And he is, as I say, that case you just mentioned there was the Liverpool case where, he was definitely banged to rights. He had basically killed that guy through negligence. At least it was negligence. It may have been something worse. And there's another guy in Canada, one of his other patients he kills, and just before he's about to appear in court, he goes into the mortuary and steals his organs because he's trying to hide the evidence. I mean, this is the kind of guy that we're talking about here. So, look, most of the time his cures may have been harmless. But I think, like we know this from people like Dr. Shipman, they're in a position of power, and he could have used that power to bump people off.
But I don't know, it just feels different in this sort of day and age, or when it was. What was your, I don't want to say what's your key takeaway from this, but when you were doing your research, what was, if there was one thing in particular that stood out and you were like, oh, I need to share this, and say later on that evening or that weekend you went to see friends and you were like, you will never, do you know the story you like to tell, the shorter version?
I think, do you know what? When he goes back to the United States, he's basically, he jumps over to the United States and English detectives follow him, and, he's tailed and so on. One of the stories that comes out is that he has this younger male assistant who journalists called Jack the Texan, and he's this kind of really sinister character who hangs out with Tumblety. And what journalists begin to ask the police as they start saying, could that guy have been committing the murders with Tumblety? Could he have been, Tumblety's enabler? Could Tumblety have directed him to commit the murders because he was younger and stronger? And then some journalists begin to say, hang on a moment, there was a string of murders in Texas a few years ago. It was called the Servant Girl Annihilator murders. And they form a connection with them as well. They begin to say, hang on a moment, did he have a trial run in Texas before he carried out the Ripper killings in London? So I think that's one story. The other one, by the way, is that when Tumblety dies in 1903, he's always carrying massive amounts of cash and diamonds on his person. He's got a lot of money, makes a lot of money out of this dodgy medicine, but he has two really cheap rings on him. And the theory that a lot of ripperologists have, and I agree with them, is that these could have been rings from Annie Chapman, the second victim of Jack the Ripper, because the two things that were missing from her were her rings and her uterus. That's the way the pathology report actually put it. And we know he had two rings, and we know he collected uteruses. I know it's horrible, but that's the truth of it. And that's reported in the papers at the time. That collection is seen by one of his dinner party guests who writes about it. So that's, there's plenty more because he is a rich vein of horrible stories. But, that's what makes the book so much fun to read, I hope.
Wait, hold on. You just said a word and a phrase, ripperologists. Is that a thing?
Yeah, ripperologists are a thing. There's a load of them. Yeah, they're kind of a community, and they have their own, like, obviously chat forums and so on. But they're ripperologists. They don't tend to like talking about Tumblety because he's a bit icky, I think, for some of them. He's also, by the way, an openly gay man, which does raise some very interesting questions about his motives. I don't think that his motives for the Ripper murders were sexual. I think that this was a kind of power thing. He was also this kind of frustrated doctor, and this whole thing of carrying out weird impromptu surgery, on these poor women. No, ripperologists are out there. They argue viciously against each other. They all support a particular suspect. I've had some of them coming at me now, by the way, saying, "Oh yeah, you're not Tumblety again. Get lost, not him. I support the Prince Albert. Or I support so and so." So they get very worked up.
Tony, let me ask you this: you are very on board that Tumblety is Jack the Ripper, and it is clear. What evidence is there to say that he is not Jack the Ripper, that you have to almost counter caveat or argue against to say he is?
Well, the main reason that I think Scotland Yard gave up on him in the end was that there was another murder after he left. So I think a lot of people at Scotland Yard went, "Oh, hang on, it's not him." But the point is that murder is now not regarded as one of the 5 what they call canonical murders, the 5 established murders that we know for definite he carried out. But at the time, that was what put people off. They thought, "Oh, hang on a moment." There were actually, by the way, copycat murders for quite a while.
There's always copycat murders, though, when it's thing. This is where, if that's the one piece of evidence that says, well, it can't have been him because there was another one afterwards. After just speaking to you today, I am swaying towards your thought process to the point that I need to have a read of this book. I really, really do. So there is a book out now. Can people get hold of it?
They most certainly can. I'd very much like it if they did. It's called Jack the Ripper and Abraham Lincoln. Jack the Ripper and Abraham Lincoln, published by Troubadour. It's on Amazon and Waterstones and W.H. Smith. But the reason I mention Amazon, get this, the ebook is free up until Saturday. I'm running a special offer. Am I allowed to mention that?
Yeah.
So you can download it for free. Everybody loves a freebie, don't they? So get your free copy now. It won't last forever. But it's ebook and paperback, and you can get it. Jack the Ripper and Abraham Lincoln by Tony McMahon. Get your copy. Have a thrilling read.
I love that, Tony, but I don't like... I got sent a book last week. I'm not going to say who I interviewed, but I did. But I got sent a book, and they sent an ebook, and I was just looking through it on my laptop. I was like, this hasn't got the same... Like, I don't really like reading on Kindles. I need books. It changes everything, I think.
Can I confess, I don't own a Kindle, and I totally agree with you. And by the way, I spent a lot of money on the paperback front cover, so you better buy it. It's got lovely red foil on it and everything. So
you want the nice books. You want them.
Look, well, you can see behind me. I'm a big fan.
Beautiful.
I have a big library here in my house. So no, I'm with you. Paper is lovely, and it's the whole experience of holding the book. You can't beat it, especially when you're reading about something that happened in the 19th century. You want to be in a dark room, sitting there with a drink, reading this, being scared of the dark.
Yeah. Having a sniff of the book every now and then. As weird as that sounds, everyone sniffs a book. Don't look at me like that. Tony, thank you very much. Absolute pleasure speaking to you.
Lovely. Same to you. Thank you. Have a good time.
I'm obsessed with this now. I need to find out. I think he is Jack the Ripper, not Tony.